date is August 14th, 2020. Four men sit in chairs, one in New York, one in Ireland, one in the UK, and one in California. The time is different for each one, but there is one thing that is true for each of them. They are launching a video game for the first time. And in 2 years' time, each of them will become known as one of the four best players in the game. This is that story. The story of the Four Kings of UFC 4. Millions have downloaded and played this game, but only a select few have ever entered the top echelon of players. Of those who have, an intense debate rages. As in any competitive game, arguments over who is the best player are fierce. Everyone has their own opinion, and nobody wants to back down. But among every argument, in every conversation, four men are brought up again and again. Any top player who is asked will put these four players in their list. The order will change, of course, because there is no definitive way to rank such a subjective topic, but each one has carved a legacy and a path in their own way, and every path is so different that each one needs to be followed to understand the kings of UFC 4. The first steps of the journey begin in Ireland, where a 16-year-old sits at that same desk and opens UFC 4 for the first time. His confidence is unwavering when he declares that he is already and will forever be the best player at this game. He doesn't have much reason to doubt it, either. Suave Jamie was a prolific high-level UFC 3 player. With a record of 9-2 in the ESFL, the game's primary and only true competitive UFC league, he was known for his brazen attitude and aggressive fighting style. The only of the four kings to be a champion prior to UFC 4, his experience guided him through the beginning stages of the game. When UFC 4 first launched, Jamie was barred from competition in the ESFL. Due to being part of the leaks that had happened a few weeks prior revealing major information on UFC 4 and causing issues for the EA team, many of whom were involved in some way in the league, he was placed behind immediately when it came to competition. After an agonizing few months of appealing and waiting for the verdict, Jamie was allowed to return a month after the release of UFC 4. Jamie started his dominance with a 3-0 run in his first 3 ESFL fights. After taking down his first 3 opponents, he was launched into his first title fight. His opponent was the undefeated fighter and the first Xbox UFC 4 champion, Dabiken. A formidable opponent in his own right, Dabiken had torn through the ESFL rankings, winning 6 fights in just a month. These two would engage in a back-and-forth brawl. Though Dabiken had his moments, Jamie would prove to be too much for the champion, and ended the fight in round 4. Jamie would go on an unprecedented run in the ESFL, winning 4 more fights in a row. As the 8-0 champion finished his final Xbox fight of the season, there was one thing he knew he had yet to accomplish. It was something that previous champions had attempted to accomplish, yet none had. If he could do it, he would be the first person in ESFL history and cement his legacy as one of the greatest players the UFC franchise had ever seen. The end of an ESFL season is a milestone event. It's the time when every player has one opportunity to change the way they will be viewed in the season with one final fight, and so that fight is always a big one. The tradition is that the dominant champion of one console will move to the other, allowing them to attempt to win the title on both consoles. The history of these attempts up to this point had proved less than ideal for the challenger, with Kinetic NRG, one of the most dominant Xbox champions ESFL had ever seen, failing in his attempt to capture the throne. Jamie, however, was determined to be the first one to accomplish this feat. The defending champion would be GOAT 1099. The first ever ESFL PlayStation champion, GOAT had a formidable 7-1 record up to this point. Known for his striking pedigree and well-rounded game style, he presented significant challenges to the young Xbox champion. These would be exacerbated when the two would fight in an Aljamain Sterling mirror match contest, neither one wanting to give any statistic or stylistic advantage to the opponent in the fighter pick. The two would go back and forth, both doing significant damage and both on the verge of losing the fight. In the end, it would be Jamie who pulled out the victory, becoming the first double champion in EA UFC history and cementing his legacy in the ESFL. In December of 2020, while Jamie was on his historic Xbox run in ESFL, a new opportunity would arise, an official partnership with the UFC. Looking to dip their toe into the esports scene of their game, it would be announced that a UFC 4 esports event, spanning 4 weeks for each console, would be taking place. Jamie jumped at the chance, knowing that he would be able to compete for real money, as well as further cement his legacy in competition. Though much of the footage is lost to history, Jamie did take his first big competitive loss in this event to the forever underrated Peyton Gardner, who would take him to a 2-1 defeat in the first title fight. One loss, however, never defines one of the kings of UFC 4. Jamie would rebound, winning multiple fights in a row and challenging Peyton once again. Understanding that another loss would mean losing his opportunity to become a UFC 4 esports champion, Jamie would come back strong in the rematch. Over the 25-minute best-of-3, he set a furious pace and outworked the champion from bell to bell, eventually scoring a 2-0 victory and becoming the final champion of the UFC 4 esports series on Xbox. Understanding that he had now accomplished what he had set out to do and declared in the very beginning of the game, Jamie was content, and for now, would take a temporary hiatus from competing at the top level, understanding that he had carved a legacy that would be hard to overtake. While Jamie sat in his chair and declared his greatness, on the same day, in the other side of the world, a college student and athlete from New York was quietly working away. He had already had the game for about a week due to his connection with EA as a game changer, and now that the game had officially released, he was ready to take his own steps toward becoming a UFC 4 king. Though he was never an ESFL champion in UFC 3, RomeroXVII was one of the most widely regarded and well-established players on the game, boasting multiple tournament wins and a top contendership status through the history of the game, as well as beating multiple UFC 3 champions. He was known for his vast knowledge of the inner workings of the game and his unique playstyle with characters, attempting to simulate their real fighting style to the best of his ability. When UFC 4 launched, Romero got right to work. Having come up short against a bathing Ash in the finals of the UFC 3 Champions Tournament, he was fiending for a chance to get his redemption and finally become an ESFL champion. Romero would go 2-0 in his first 2 ESFL fights, avenging his loss against a bathing Ash with a swift first-round standing guillotine. From there, he was entered into the PlayStation Grand Prix to crown the first ESFL PlayStation UFC 4 champion. After winning his opening round matchups and beating longtime competitive foe Kinetic NRG in the semifinals, he would be entered against the same test Suave Jamie had to face to win the PlayStation Championship, before Jamie ever had to do it. There is a reason that GOAT 1099 comes up repeatedly in these discussions. Despite not being one of the 4 kings, he is undoubtedly one of the best players to ever compete on the EA UFC series, and it is this reason that found him in the finals facing RomeroXVII. Despite this formidable challenge, however, Romero would pass with flying colors. He would beat GOAT 2-0, retaining his undefeated record and becoming the first UFC 4 PlayStation champion. Romero would go on to be undefeated, defending his title against multiple formidable opponents, including former UFC 3 champion PapaDoc 60 and up-and-coming prospect Prime Boxer. However, wrestling season and real-life obligations would cut his domination short. On November 9th, 2020, RomeroXVII would unexpectedly announce that he was vacating the PlayStation title. It's interesting to consider what may have happened had Romero stuck around. GOAT had worked his way back into the title discussion, and after vacating, won the belt and, as we know, would go on to fight Suave Jamie. Had he remained champion and defended his belt, we may have very well seen those two square off instead of the match we got, and gotten a very different result. As of now, though, fans would have to wait to see that matchup. After the UFC esports event ended for Xbox, the PlayStation side opened up. With his availability cleared, Romero was ready to get back into competition. Ready to prove his lasting dominance over the console, he signed up for the opening tournament. Things went well at first, with Romero once again beating Prime Boxer and Kinetic NRG to get himself to the semifinals, where he would drop a loss to notorious exploiter T4H Rayhan. After this fight, Suave Jamie would attempt to make history once again and become the UFC esports double champion by winning the title on PlayStation. These two would fight in a match that will be covered later in the video, with Romero coming out on top and challenging his old rival, a bathing Ash, for the PlayStation Championship in the last week of UFC esports. Romero and Ash had a long-standing rivalry ever since the UFC 3 Champions Tournament. Though Ash would best Romero in the finals, Romero maintained that a glitch that had occurred during the fight caused him to lose, and he deserved the win and the crown. Due to this, there was serious animosity going into the title fight. Though Ash fought well, Romero would end with a 2-0 record, submitting a bathing Ash both times and becoming the last PlayStation esports champion, adding another belt to his growing collection. After this victory, Romero's schedule became busy once again, only being able to compete occasionally until the biggest event of his career, something that 3 of the 4 kings attended and will be discussed later in this video. For now, the attention shifts back to Europe. The United Kingdom has a long and storied history with the UFC, with Leon Edwards and Michael Bisping both taking losses in their careers and bouncing back to eventually become champions. Their journeys to the belt were very similar in some ways to that of BlakeTylerr's. Having played UFC 3 only casually, Blake decided that in UFC 4 he was going to take things much more seriously, and committed himself to becoming one of the very best in the world, as well as being the person with the most prize money ever won in UFC 4. In Season 1 of UFC 4, Blake took his time and built himself up to become one of the best. With 5 wins and only 1 loss in a championship bout that will be covered later, Blake poised himself to make his big run in Season 2. With a vicious win over perennial top contender Slick Colt, he prepared to face his own championship challenge in Dino MMA. A fearsome competitor, Dino was widely known throughout UFC 4 as one of the best and most creative kickboxers in the game. Despite this, BlakeTylerr would take him down and win his own UFC 4 championship on Xbox. After 2 successful title defenses, Blake would befall the same fate that Romero faced in esports, T4H Rayhan. Though Blake put up a valiant fight, at the time, ESFL was new to exploiting players and was not fully aware of how to combat them within its rule set. Due to this, Rayhan would end up taking Blake's belt, and he would not compete for the rest of the season except for coming back at the end for a pure fun match. Despite this loss, however, Blake came back strong in Season 3 after a hiatus. Taking down multiple challengers and the champion, he would beat competitors such as Fatinator and God Eat My Pig to become the Xbox champion at the end of the ESFL season. Due to this case, Blake was ready to do the same thing that Jamie had done before him, become a double champion. This would not be an easy task. The fight will be covered in the later portions of this video, but he would end up facing Zyaf, or me. After a back and forth fight, Blake would end up taking the championship belt and becoming an ESFL double champion. He has not competed in ESFL since this feat, but is preparing to make a return at this time. On June 6th, 2021, a unique tournament would take place. 8 players, all regarded as fantastic players through the history of the EA UFC series, would compete, spanning multiple games. BlakeTylerr would be one of those players. Though some of the fights are remiss to mention here due to taking place on games that are not being covered today, the final bout took place on UFC 4. Blake would find himself in the finals, standing across from PapaDoc. Though it had taken a fierce journey to get to the spot that he was at, Blake is known for nothing if not his ability to remain calm under fire. With a dominant performance against a man who has spoiled many's aspiration of greatness, Blake would end with a 3-0 victory over PapaDoc and claim the $5,000 prize in the ESFL GOAT tournament. This would make him the largest prize pool winner out of any player in the EA UFC games, and cemented his legacy as a king of EA UFC 4. When it comes to creating videos such as this, it's very hard to rank oneself on the game. No matter what, it is very easy to overestimate or undervalue one's performances and abilities. Despite that, when gathering references for the video, every player I spoke to listed me as one of the 4 kings. Though it may seem conceited to place myself in the same category as the other 3 on the list, it is necessary due to the nature of achievements. That being said, I want to approach the rest of the video as an outside narrator, and so will be referring to myself as my character, Zyaf. The youngest of the 4 kings, Zyaf was only 14 years old when UFC 4 released. Despite that, he had begun to make a name for himself in UFC 3, though he had never competed in ESFL. Determined to set himself apart from the rest of the competitors, he began to compete. Zyaf would not have the same success the other 3 kings had at first. While the others had some form of experience with the competitive nature of the EA UFC games, UFC 4 was the first time he had ever truly grappled with it. Due to this, Zyaf traded wins and losses in the opening season of UFC 4. He would fight and beat some top-level players in this opening season, but ended it with an unassuming record of 10-5 after ESFL 100. Despite this, Zyaf had recently caught the eye of Romero and began to work with him throughout this period of time. Over the following few months, Zyaf would improve his game tremendously under Romero's mentorship and began to blaze a trail through the ESFL. When Season 2 began, it was all business. Zyaf would start the season by immediately defeating Romero in unfortunate circumstances that will be covered later in this video. After this, he was launched straight into a title fight, the first of such chances he had ever received. This fight would be against longtime bulldozer and top player Swiss Libax. A former UFC 3 champion and member of Team Dark, Swiss was no easy task. After a tough first round, Zyaf would take out the streaking Canadian and claim his first UFC 4 title. Following this, Zyaf would go on a historic run, winning 5 title defenses in a row against the likes of the ever-present and challenging GOAT 1099 and the extremely underrated LS Persiu. He would find himself at an all-too-familiar crossroads, being 7-0 and the champion at the end of the season. Due to the ESFL finally deciding what to do with the exploiter Rayhan being banned after winning the championship, his opponent would be the champion who had only won the belt a day prior, JC21. Though Zyaf has long been known as the young prodigy, JC was just 13 at the time the two would fight. In the clash of those unable to grow a beard, Zyaf would come out on top in a dominant victory, being the third of the Four Kings to be a double champion on ESFL. While Blake and Jamie decided to vacate after winning their belts, Zyaf is the only one who decided to stick around. Though he was dominant to start, defending both belts multiple times, Zyaf would end up losing a couple times this time around, ending Season 3 with an overall record of 10-4, with his final loss being to the aforementioned BlakeTylerr in the double championship fight after Zyaf regained his belt in a rematch of a fight he lost. Despite this loss, Zyaf had staked his claim as the only person in ESFL history to win and defend both ESFL belts, as well as beating almost every top contender on both consoles along the way. It's safe to say that Suave Jamie has been the bane of BlakeTylerr's ESFL aspirations throughout UFC 4. The first time the two met, Blake was an up-and-coming UFC 4 fighter who was making waves with his undefeated record. Jamie, however, was an unstoppable force in Season 1, taking the fight to heavyweight, where he knew that Blake would have a strategic weakness due to not practicing at that weight. Jamie would put on a wrestling clinic and finish Blake. He would do the same with his striking at the end of Season 2, beating Blake in a Conor McGregor mirror match and making their record 2-0. Blake would pull back in a Prioxis tournament, winning a hard-fought encounter and putting a win for himself back. However, when the two matched up for the fourth time in another tournament, Blake would have a stroke of bad luck, dominating the fight and then getting caught and knocked out clean, with Jamie taking the overall record to 3-1. The first time Suave Jamie and RomeroXVII met was in a tournament hosted by veteran content creator Heem the Dream. In a careful and non-committal bout, they would fight to a controversial and tight decision, in which Jamie would pick up the 29-28 victory. After this fight, Romero was determined to not lose another debatable decision. When Jamie came over to PlayStation in the first UFC esports event, Romero decided to put his stamp on the matter. Surprising everybody by picking Zabit Magomedsharipov, Romero would dominate the streaking Irishman with his wrestling and win a 30-26 decision. However, this would not last, as Jamie would yet again win a controversial decision against the New Yorker, this time in a $100 created fighter tournament with a 29-28 split decision. This would bring Jamie's record to 2-1 over Romero before the two matched up at ESFL Live. Though these two never fought in ESFL, they have met 3 separate times. The first was in a tournament on January 7th, 2021. Zyaf had been practicing using Steven Wonderboy Thompson and had been beginning to claim that he was the best Wonderboy user in the game. Jamie, not one to back down from a challenge, would mirror match Zyaf. Though it was a closely contested bout, Jamie's wrestling would make the difference, securing the third round and winning a 29-28 decision. Zyaf would get his tournament revenge, however, taking a 2-0 win back in a $100 stand and bang tournament. This would tie the record at 1-1 before the two matched up at ESFL Live. When speaking to BlakeTylerr, he lamented that he only ever matched up with Romero once on UFC 4 competition. Due to them competing in different eras of the game and fighting on different consoles, they struggled to find fights with each other. These two did match up once, however, in the opening round of a UFC esports tournament. Blake would beat Romero 2-0 in this tournament, with a knockout and a split decision win, something that seems to be somewhat of a theme in Romero's losses. The nature of the UFC 4 community and how the competitive fights are determined causes a set win to be counted as one win against the other in competitive records, so Blake ends with a 1-0 record over Romero. Blake would also only face Zyaf once, due to many of the same reasons he only faced Romero once. This time, it would be for the ESFL Double Championship. Dominating his own console, Blake was given the shot against a resurging Zyaf on PlayStation. Blake was supremely confident heading into this fight, and that confidence would remain unshaken leaving it. Though it was well fought, Blake clearly won and pulled out a round 3 victory against Zyaf to claim his double championship throne. This would end his record with Zyaf as 1-0. Zyaf and Romero matched up twice before ESFL Live over their long history as friends and training partners in UFC 4. The first time was a $100 tournament in which both picked 4-star fighters. Though the footage is lost to history, Romero would get a dominant knockout with Corey Sandhagen over Zyaf's Song Yadong. The second time, circumstances were extremely odd. After his win over PapaDoc 60 at ESFL 100, Zyaf was making a championship run. For the title eliminator, he would be fighting Romero. However, Romero had recently had an eye injury and was recovering. Due to this, when Zyaf took Romero down, Romero was physically unable to see and defend himself. To the shock of everybody, Zyaf defeated Romero in round 1 to become the #1 contender and put the record of the two going into ESFL Live at 1-1. Well, the event referenced all throughout the video is finally ready to be spoken about. ESFL Live. The culmination of the entire competitive community and all the hard work ESFL has done was put to the test in one 10-hour event. live in Las Vegas. 3 of the 4 Kings attended. Romero flew in from New York, Jamie flew in from Ireland, Zyaf drove in from California, Blake was unable to attend. As the matchups were read out, a gasp was heard from the competitors. Zyaf and Romero had been matched up in round 1 of the qualifiers. The first fight started slowly and ended quickly, with both fighters feeling each other out. Romero, thinking nothing of it, threw a 4-piece combination ending with a head kick to end the round. He did not know he would never see the end of that round, with the Zyaf landing a quick uppercut counter to knock Romero out. The second fight in the set was a much more closely contested bout. Both fighters landed multiple knockdowns and rocks, throwing everything they had at each other. For both, this event was their chance to prove their skill over the other players in the game. At the end of the day, Zyaf would come out on top, capitalizing on a mistake from Romero and knocking him out to win the set 2-0 and ending their UFC 4 competition record at 2-1. Zyaf would go on to fight Suave Jamie later in the qualifiers. Though Jamie put up a good effort in these fights, Zyaf had been on an absolute tear throughout the entire event leading up to that point and had something to prove. Putting on a striking and wrestling clinic, Zyaf would beat Suave Jamie 2-0, advancing their record to 2-1 Zyaf. However, Zyaf was not out of the woods yet. Recovering from his loss and bouncing back, Jamie would meet Zyaf in the semifinals of the entire tournament. The winner would guarantee themselves $1,500 in a fight for the $2,500 prize of the event. Jamie took the first. Zyaf took the second. At 1-1 apiece, everything came down to the third fight. Zyaf made a fatal mistake and rushed in haphazardly, blowing his own stamina and attempting to finish the fight, and Jamie would take him down and finish him, ending their UFC 4 competition record at a cold even 2-2. Jamie would have to fight one more time in the night, against a man he was almost even with and a longtime rival. RomeroXVII had worked his way back up after his loss to Zyaf and had taken no other set losses in the tournament. For $2,500, the two went at it fiercely. In a best of 5 fights, each won 2. Everything came down to the wire, and at the end.
Man, flopped it. There's a big rock. Here comes Romero, but a pull counter.
There we go. We have a champion, ladies and gentlemen. Your champion here tonight, RomeroXVII.
Romero would win their fight, tying their overall competitive record to 2-2 and winning the biggest competitive event in EA UFC 4 history. First place would be Romero, second would be Jamie, third would be Zyaf. The 3 kings who had entered the event would be the ones who left it on top. It's easy to claim when looking at the competitive record between any of these 4 men, which is extremely close for all of them, that one may be better than any of the others. But that is never true. The reason that there are 4 kings of this game is that none has ever usurped the others. That is the beauty of the elite level of EA UFC 4. No one man stands on the throne alone. Each one brings a unique facet of the game to their playstyle and their skill set, and each one deserves a crown and to be called a king of UFC 4.